Hello, everyone, and welcome to another one of our Avatar Bible studies. Today we are beginning Volume 3, and of course, beginning as we should, numerically, with Episode 1, The Awakening. We're going to be discussing, hopefully, what was as encouraging to you as it was to me, noting and I'll just be honest with you all here, the trudgery that was getting through Book 2. Not to say that it was bad, we got tough for goodness sake, but when it came to the biblical themes therein, it seemed like I was spending more time clarifying Hinduism and then defining the difference between Hinduism and Christianity, whereas to this, it's getting a little easier. So if you could turn with me to the book of John, chapter 12, Jesus made an interesting statement and had an interesting encounter, which ultimately, I believe, parallels not only with an event in today's episode, but also showcases the two main events of today's episode and what we can take away from it biblically, which is what matters. In John chapter 12 and verse 27, Jesus speaking says, "My soul is now troubled. And what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? But for this purpose I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name." Then a voice came from heaven saying, "I have both glorified it, and I will glorify it again." Therefore the people who stood by and heard it said that it had thundered. Others said, "An angel has spoken to him." So some people just heard a loud noise. Others recognized words were being spoken, but they didn't exactly grasp what was said. Jesus answered and said, "This voice did not come because of me, but for your sake. Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out, and I, if I am lifted up from the earth," reference to crucifixion, "will draw all peoples to myself." This he said, signifying by what death he would die. Now, when looking for encouragement, there's going to be two kinds of people that you'll run into. Those who will lie to you, or those who will tell you the truth. Zuko and Aang certainly had a lot taken away from them in today's episode, and I want to determine who is given the right kind of encouragement based on the example of Jesus Christ, who in this passage was facing the horrors of a Roman crucifixion, rejection by everyone he loves, and having the sins of the world poured out on him. That's generally a time where you need a pick-me-up. So starting with what we know about his source of encouragement, that will be our first focus, and why he was given it, being just as important, we'll see how Aang's discouragement actually ended up being worthwhile, whereas Zuko being given everything he wanted from episode 1, not so much. Starting with, of course, Zuko, who had his honor restored. There's an important saying in economic circles that if you want to get something, it's going to cost you something. The smart person gives what they don't need or can't keep, note the value there, for something that they do need. The hardest part for most people is determining value. What do I actually need, and what's worth giving up as opposed to keeping? Hoarders are especially bad with this. Zuko thought that the restoration of his relationship with Ozai would be the most valuable thing in the world, until he discovered it would cost him his relationship with his uncle. He thought that the exchange would be worthwhile until he realized the one who gave it to him was Azula. So now we have two problems. What I think I want ends up costing me what I'm told I should value more, and when I'm given what I think I want, it comes from someone who prides themselves on being a liar. Let me know if this sounds familiar to anybody. In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 8, Jesus made an interesting observation as far as value systems are concerned. Mark 8:34 says, "When he had called the people to himself, with his disciples also," so this is a broad audience statement, anyone could listen to this, "he said to them, 'Whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life,'" note this, "for my sake and the gospel's, will save it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me," remember Jesus is speaking, "and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." Now, note the contrast between Zuko's decision and Jesus' advice. His value system placed a relationship with him, referring to Jesus, above even your life. In fact, even above your life and the most brutal death ever imagined by human beings in all of history, that being a cross. But the reason he gives for this is essentially mentioning the same things that caused Zuko to regret his decision. What do I mean? Well, note Jesus' exchange rate, if you will. If you choose a relationship with Jesus, what will it cost you? That's just a rule. Well, it'll cost you your life. But the source of the one you're getting this relationship from is the one who gave his life first and raised it from the dead. So in the end, what are you actually losing? On the other hand, if you choose not a relationship with Jesus, the cost is your soul, and the source is, well, as stated before, not Jesus. So going back to the original point, if you choose a relationship with Jesus, what you lose, you'll ultimately get back from its source anyway. It's not something that you can keep, but it's something you can and have been given before, will be given again if you go back to him. On the other hand, you choose anything less than him, then you don't gain anything, you just lose something. That is your soul, something you don't really value at this moment, and you don't get it back. John chapter 10 and verse 17, Jesus made the case in point as far as why he was the better option. "Therefore, in light of all that was said in verses 1 through 16, my Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have the power to lay it down, and I have the power to take it again. This command I have received from my Father." Now note, in light of all of the Christians that even to this day are losing their lives for the sake of believing in Jesus, it puts things into perspective, doesn't it? We trust Jesus to give us our honor because he first demonstrated that it could be given back. On the other hand, we shouldn't trust people like Azula because they're only using us in order to keep what they could lose. In her case, her honor, but in our case, our lives, which is what brings us to Aang. Aang had his purpose restored, but notice that in order to gain something, something also had to be lost. If you want something, it's going to cost you something else. The question, again, as stated before, is if the price is worth the exchange. We question, and this is important, whether the decisions that we make are the right ones, not necessarily based on the overall consequences, but more on the immediate. How does it make me feel right now? Well, my hair grew out, and now I've lost my arrow, and Katara has to wear a disguise, so she lost her hair loopies, and, well, Sokka hasn't lost his boomerang yet, spoiler alert, but note the point. They've lost a serious part of their identity. They have to blend in with a world not their own. So, noting all of the loss, you have to ask the question, was it worth it? And this is what's key. If, and this is also a big if, I'm asked, what would I do if I'm in a situation where I don't know if I made the right decision? Well, like I mentioned at the beginning, you can ask people around you who will either tell you the truth or lie. And what was interesting was Aang, when he asked his friends, when he asked his peers, when he asked those, not his age group, but definitely about as smart as he was, what they thought, they didn't have much to say for or against it. In fact, they pretty much told him exactly what any of us would want to hear. No, you made the right decision. The problem is, how do they know that? They're either A, lying to you because they don't know or they want to spare your feelings as a higher priority than the actual facts on the ground, or B, they could be just as misinformed as you are and just tell you what you want to hear. which is interesting because when you note, is my purpose as the avatar lost? Well, who would know what the purpose of the avatar is apart from the avatar himself and those above him, none of which were present at the moment being asked? Or were they? Why was it that Avatar Roku was the voice that was heeded? Why is it that a voice from heaven references somebody, being Princess Yue, of course, but notice this. Why were their voices heeded and those of Aang's friends not? Because those are the ones who could be trusted to not only be telling the truth, but actually know what they're talking about. And this is what's key. When we're talking about the passage we opened with, when Jesus came to this world to lay down his life, to dethrone the ruler of this world, to redeem mankind back to a relationship with God, it wasn't going to be a pretty process. And he needed the encouragement. But who did Jesus receive the encouragement from? Or rather, did he need the encouragement in the first place? And that's also important. Because while Aang, as an apt illustration of Jesus in some regards, wasn't in this case, because Jesus didn't need the encouragement. He trusted his Father. The voice was for their sake, for the listeners, those who would respond to this death and not understand. So here's the point. Why did Jesus say his soul was troubled? Well, he's obviously about to lose his life. No one wants to do that unless the exchange is going to be worthwhile. Note the point with Zuko. Jesus found that exchange worthwhile because everything he'd lose, he'd ultimately gain anyway. Why did Jesus focus on the glory of his Father's name? Because that was the purpose he came to this world to fulfill. See the point made with stating this would be the way the enemy would lose his power. State the point, in fact, that we, with the benefit of hindsight, know that Aang is going exactly the way he needs to, even if the process isn't pretty. But third, why did Jesus say the voice from heaven was for the listener's sake rather than his? Because as I stated before, Jesus trusted his Father. And that's something that we could learn ultimately from, as to why the voice from heaven is worth even giving our lives for. Because when it ultimately comes down to it, that one first gave his life for us. The one who speaks to us through his word, the witness of his Son, that is the voice that we trust. That's not the voice of a liar. That's not the voice of someone who is just as misinformed as we are. That is the voice of our Creator. And so if we're going to trust anybody, I'd start with the top, where I at least would look up. You may not see Princess Yue, but in all fairness, I think that God himself would be much better. Thank you for your time and listening to this study. If any sincere questions, ask them. If you'd like to encourage the ministry, you know where to go. But most importantly, if you know someone who's a fan of Avatar but maybe haven't seen these sort of themes discussed from today's episode, please share this with anyone you feel would be blessed by it. Thank you for your time. Remember that Jesus loves you and that his insight into your life, your purpose, your ultimate exchange program in this life, if you will, your sense of priorities are more than worth trusting in his hands. Because while we do often make the same kind of mistakes that Zuko does, we also just as often end up in the same places that Aang found himself with, asking, what now? And it's then that we could either go to those around us or we can go to the one above us. God bless you, and we'll talk to you all next time.